Hello, everybody. My name is Jim, and this is a character analysis for The Quiet Tenant by Clémence Michallon. Before I get into this, I do want to encourage everybody listening to this to read the book if you enjoy a thriller. There are some content warnings in this book, however, before you get into it. There are mentions of the R word as well as SA and other potential triggers that come with a story about someone being held captive. However, none of these scenes are explicit, and I can tell you now that if any of them were, I would not have read this book, and I certainly wouldn't have enjoyed it. So if you have any fears around that, because I know that sometimes authors get out of hand with some of the detailed descriptions around those sorts of things. Yes, they do exist in this book, but they are brushed over quickly. You do not have to experience these. As a result, I personally found this book a lot more enjoyable than if they had been written out in full detail. The reason is because this book is very cyclical. It goes over some of the same actions. However, there is a progression with each repetitive action. So you do get a lot of those mentions, but again, it's not explicit. So if you think that you can handle this book without those detailed descriptions, then definitely give this a try. This video is going to contain spoilers, and I don't want to spoil a book if you plan on reading it. So go ahead and save this video for later if you want to come back to it and read the book first. It's one that I could not put down. I really enjoyed it. And this was Clémence Michallon's debut novel, or at least it's her debut English novel, because I think that she had an interview where she said that she had written something in French before, and this was her first dip into English. And she did great. So I'm definitely going to pick up more books about her. But with all the rambling aside, I'm going to get into the character analysis now. So if you want to read this book, dip out now and come back later and discuss in the comments what you thought about it. So I contemplated who I wanted to put at the top of this. Aidan is the reason why all of this is happening. However, Rachel is our primary protagonist. She is the person who has been held captive for 5 years in a shed, and we find out very early on that her name isn't actually Rachel, but she's basically had her identity stolen by Aidan, so that he could have a little bit more control over her, and that she is a bit more discreet, less noticeable, and the people searching for her will not recognize who she is. In those 5 years, she has repeated in her brain that her name is Rachel, that Aidan found her, and, these very abusive ideas where she would be nothing, without him she would be dead, which is sickening. And I have never in my life wanted someone to win as much as I wanted, quote, Rachel to win. And we'll find out her real name later, but for now I'm just going to call her Rachel, because that is how we knew her for 99% of the book. Throughout this novel, we get an idea of how her mind works. If you've ever watched the movie Hush, a lot of her internal dialogue reminded me of that movie, where she would put herself in different scenarios, different escape scenarios, and she would, through process of elimination, figure out the best way to escape her situation. Now, in 5 years, she has been handcuffed in a shed. Aidan feeds her leftovers and basically watches over her as she takes care of other business. So he has been very careful over the past 5 years, and this has not given Rachel many opportunities to think about escaping. However, Aidan's wife had cancer. We start in the shed, but we also find out that his wife has passed away. What happens after Aidan's wife's death is that they are kicked out of the house that they currently live in, and they need to move somewhere else. And the judge of the town gives Aidan a house. As if kidnapping and murdering women was not enough to absolutely hate Aidan and want his downfall to be freaking glorious, the town loves him. They should have taken a hint from his wife's parents, his in-laws. They hated him, and that's why they kicked him out of the house that they originally allowed him to move into. Obviously, they were keeping that house for his wife. They had no concern about him. As soon as his wife died, they were like, you gotta go. The town really should have taken clues from the people who knew Aidan best, and they didn't. They treated him like he was a saint because he was always so helpful and he was so handsome and so nice to everybody and kind. He would give mouth to mouth to a puppy like he could do no wrong. Oh my gosh, it just infuriated me even more because I know Aidans. I don't know them in the sense that, you know, they are kidnappers and they do these really awful things, but I do know these people who are treated like they can do no wrong, but behind closed doors they are not the person that you think they are. And so it just, ooh, it made me want Aidan to lose so bad. Rachel was able to convince Aidan, or maybe Aidan already had this in his mind, to take Rachel with him. And this was step number one for him, you know, being a bit sloppy. In this book, he becomes sloppier and sloppier, and a lot of it we find out has to do with his wife's cancer, just throwing him off his game. You know, he had victims before Rachel, he had victims after Rachel, and as you go through the different victims and their stories, it kind of reveals the wear and tear that his wife's cancer and his wife's death is playing on his ability to, quote, take care of these victims that he finds. Throughout this book, Rachel provides some rules that she follows inside and outside the shed. And this kind of goes back to the whole Hush situation where she has scenarios constantly playing through her mind about how she's going to escape, how she's going to survive, how she's going to take care of herself, and be able to build up her strength so that she can leave. Ultimately, for 5 years, she has been confined to the shed. All of her rules are around the shed. So this is an adjustment for her too, because now that she's moving into the judge's house, she gets a bedroom, she gets a bed of her own, she is allowed to participate in activities with the family, and she has to introduce herself as Rachel, who is a family friend who needed a place to stay, and therefore Aidan, being the nice, perfect guy he is, allows her to sublet a room in his house. This is how she's going to present herself to Aidan's daughter, Cecelia. Cecelia is a typical teenager. She doesn't really want to participate in all of the things that her dad does. Her dad is, again, showered with so much praise, and there are different events throughout the book that I'm going to get to later that Cecelia has to be part of, you know, to make appearances. But she just lost her mom, and she has these awkward feelings around having Rachel, who is another woman in the house. She isn't hostile towards Rachel. She's just very skeptical, you know, wondering why she's there. Is she really a family friend? She doesn't really know what's going on in the house, but she does eventually befriend Rachel and treats her as, you know, another female figure that she can bounce ideas off of and talk to. And that is a relationship that builds up over time that Rachel realizes later that she can take advantage of. We are introduced to Cecelia during a dinner sequence. They just have a family dinner, which Rachel is able to be a part of, so there's no more sectioning out casseroles to take up to Rachel in her bedroom. She actually gets to participate in the conversation and come down and sit with the family. They had a tradition of watching Jeopardy whenever it was on, and eventually it grew into more of a relationship where they would end up watching TV, watching movies together, and they would end up being friends, which was a little bit odd because on one hand, I can understand how they could become friends because Cecelia was missing that female kinship in her life after her mother died, but it was very soon after her mother died. So I feel like there should have been maybe a little bit more pushback with Cecelia in the beginning, but overall, I'm happy that Rachel was able to create that bond with her. Just popping in here post-production to tell you the primary reason why Rachel and Cecelia became friends. So as I mentioned before, Rachel was able to participate in the family dinners, and because of this, she started gaining some of her weight back, her strength, because she had been starved so much in the shed, because she would only get leftovers if there were, you know, casseroles, lasagnas, things that Aidan could section off without raising any alarms. And as Rachel was regaining her strength, she began her cycle. again. She had not had that in a very long time, in a few years. So she started to have cramps. She started to feel the symptoms of the monthly cycle. During one of the dinners, Aidan planned to go on a shopping trip. He asked Cecelia specifically, what she wanted from the store, but Rachel also requested pads, feminine hygiene products that she needs to take care of what's happening with her body now that she's regaining her strength. He pretended to write it down, but he kind of gave her a look. And then later you realize he did not provide what she needed. However, Cecelia did. Cecelia knew where Rachel was sleeping, and she managed to slide pads under her door, or she was able to get into the bedroom at some point and give them to her, and Rachel had to discreetly kick those pads away so that Aidan was not aware that they were there. So because of this act of kindness from Cecelia, their bond started forming. There was a time in this book when Rachel assumed that something was happening to Cecelia at night, where Aidan would go into her bedroom and certain things would happen between father and daughter that should not happen, if you understand where I'm going. At the end of the day, that never happened. That was just Rachel assuming, just because of what Aidan did to her in private. So she assumed that Aidan was this monster to his daughter as well. But we were able to get into Cecilia's perspective, and it made me wonder if this was actually happening, Cecelia would not have this amount of love for her father that she does in her chapters. So it was weird until it finally came to light that Cecelia actually was opening the bedroom door herself in the middle of the night and going downstairs to look for, journals and photos of her mom, just things to remember her mother. So Rachel ended up getting that all wrong, but to be fair, I can understand why she thought that those things were going on, again, because those were happening to her, and Aidan was a horrible, horrible person. But Cecelia did truly love her dad, and unfortunately that was the only parent that she had, so she clung to him. And that was understandable too, because she didn't know what was going on. She didn't know about Rachel's situation. And so this is where Emily comes in. Emily honestly had me cracking up with some of the things that she did. Like, I was cheering. I'm so happy that Emily is a meddler and that she is just the worst person that Aidan could have fallen for. He really met his match with Emily, and it really was great. So Emily is a bartender or a barista. She works in the local restaurant that was handed down to her from her parents, her father, and she already, at the beginning of the story, she already has a crush on Aidan. He is this, handsome guy, whatever. And he comes into her restaurant, I believe, every Thursday or maybe every other day. And so she expects him. She finally has the courage to make him a different drink than what he usually gets. I think it's a cherry Coke, and she ends up making him something else. He drinks it, they strike up conversations, and this is where the romance starts. Because Aidan's wife passed away, the town comes together to create a fundraiser for him and Cecelia, and to do this, they scheduled a run just as a show of support as they are basically rebuilding their lives. Emily offers to set up hot chocolate at the end of the run to get a little bit closer to Aidan and to show that, she is supportive and she cares about him and his situation, to which Aidan responds that he is very appreciative. Aidan, of course, comes to the fundraiser with his daughter Cecelia, who doesn't really want to be there because he ends up ignoring her, hanging out with Emily, setting up the hot chocolate stand, and taking it down. And when they're taking it down, that is when they, take their clothes down and do some do's in the kitchen of the restaurant when it's just them. Emily and Aidan date temporarily, and then suddenly things go dark. The catalyst that causes Aidan to more or less ghost her is that Emily decides to take cookies to his house. She parks outside and texts him that she was coming over. And Aidan, of course, not wanting anybody in the house, texts her back, I'm going to meet you outside. And he does. He meets her outside. She hands him the cookies. He puts them on the roof of the car. They end up kissing. And this is when Rachel tries to escape with Cecelia, and Cecelia stubs her toe. At that point, obviously, Rachel thought that Cecelia was in danger too. She found an opportunity to leave while Aidan was distracted. She grabbed Cecelia while they were watching a movie. She tried to take her outside and tell her, we need to go, we need to leave. Cecelia ends up stubbing her toe on a coffee table. Cecelia screams. Aidan runs in. Emily wonders what's going on because it's coming from his house, and he told her before that Cecelia was asleep. He gives her the excuse that Cecelia has night terrors, but obviously the conversation's cut short. He runs inside. He accidentally leaves the cookies on top of the roof, and you hear, quote, this thud sound as the cookies fall off. Emily wonders if she hit somebody, and for a second I thought, oh no, Rachel actually left and she hit Rachel with her car, but no, it was just the cookies falling on the road. Aidan runs back inside. He immediately blames Rachel, even though Cecelia tries to protect her, and she says, I was just being clumsy, I got into an accident and Rachel was trying to help me. Aidan can just see red. He sends Cecelia to her room, and Rachel thought then and there she was going to die. He wraps his hands around her neck like he does all of his other victims. He drives her into the woods. She ends up falling and receiving a concussion. She blacks out, and then she finds out then that she is back in the house again. I think it was around that time that we saw when Rachel was initially taken, and again we were able to get into her head and her thought process as to why she entered the truck in the first place, because he has a gun, he knows how to use it, he threatens Rachel all the time. He reminds her that he is a linesman. He is able to see the entire town from the power line poles that he perches on top of to fix the power lines. He eventually gives her a tracking device that he can follow on his phone that he has customized to make it so that it's more difficult for her to take off, which was a weird thing to add in later. I wish that he would have done that sooner so that it didn't seem like a random plot device. It seems like if he were the type of person to be extra careful, that he would have given that to her as soon as they entered the house, as soon as she had a bit more free will. So it was a bit weird to add that in later. But the third thing was that he said that he had cameras everywhere. And this, of course, made Rachel afraid of leaving because she believed him. He threatened her all the time. She believed that he had cameras everywhere because he was this careful guy, and that if she tried anything, he would be back home in no time because it was a small house and she didn't really know where she was. And he even did some things to prove that she was afraid and that she wasn't willing to escape. Like, at one point he left her handcuffs unlocked and she thought that he was being sloppy and he made a mistake, but she revealed to him later that he did that, and he let her know that he knew he did that. He did that on purpose as a power play, just so he knew that he had her where he wanted her and she was not willing to leave. Back to Emily and the cookies. This was the catalyst to Aidan blowing Emily off, ghosting her. And I've been in Emily's situation before where, I feel like I have this connection with somebody and they ghost me, and I keep going through my brain like, oh gosh, what happened? Is it something that I did? Am I not good enough? All of these really terrible questions that you ask yourself when the person that you're talking to is just a jerk. They're just I almost said a bad word. But yeah, you don't want any Aidans, especially Aidan. I mean, good Lord. If you knew what he did behind closed doors, absolutely not. Eventually, Emily's obsession grows so much that she decides to come up with any excuse she possibly can to go into Aidan's house. So she comes up with this plan where her excuse is that she smelled smoke and she was worried about the family. Cecelia is asleep. She's taking a nap, and Rachel is downstairs, I believe, watching TV. And Emily walks up to the door, rings the doorbell. No one answers. So Emily snoops around, finds the spare key under a pot, lets herself in, and she and Rachel meet. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Backtrack to Aidan's threats and his power plays Before this scene, he takes Rachel into town, allows her to see everything that's going on, allows her to see where she is. He goes into the town center where he meets the judge, and the judge asks, who Rachel is. And before she can say anything, Aidan introduces her as his cousin who came to visit after his wife died to provide some comfort and consolation. This was again another threat. He wanted her to see the outside. He wanted her to know that nobody's looking for her. This was another one of his biggest mistakes. Fast forward again to Emily being inside the house and meeting Rachel. That's who she introduces herself as the cousin. Emily immediately knows that she's not just a cousin because she was so awkward about it. But at the same time, she's like, okay, whatever. I'm just going to talk to this woman and get, see what's up because I'm being ghosted and I want to know what's happening here. So the two of them have a conversation and Emily, awkwardly leaves. Later on, when Aidan comes in and does his routine, Rachel has this revelation that he doesn't have cameras around his house. If he did, then he would have known that Emily came in and spoke to her and all of this stuff had taken place. She was worried that Aidan was going to punish her, but he didn't do it. So this gave her enough courage to start snooping around the house herself. She asked Cecelia for a safety pin and a writing pen to pick a door into the basement that Aidan is adamant about no one going into. And it is this basement where he keeps all of his mementos from his victims before and after Rachel, as well as a collection of some of his wife's things. So she snoops around, she looks inside some of the boxes, and she finds some things about her, including some Polaroids that Aidan had taken of Rachel doing her everyday routine, following her, making sure he knew where she was at the exact time that she was taken. It's at this point where Aidan starts treating Emily like one of his next victims. She still feels the feelings for Aidan. She wants an explanation, but she realizes that he hasn't been coming into the restaurant over the past few days, and she's just really upset. She is angry with him. She wants an apology. While Emily is obsessing over him, she starts to see his truck places and she thinks that she's hallucinating. She thinks it's funny. She's like, oh, he's just, looking out for me. As soon as she turns around, he's gone. He vanishes. Some of Rachel's findings were Polaroids that Aidan had taken. He follows these women to know where they are at certain amounts of time, get their routines. It was making that connection that gave me chills, personally, because when Emily thought that she was hallucinating when she saw his truck in the town square, it hit you when Rachel was looking through those Polaroids and she was putting two and two together that this is how he's treating Emily. He's stalking her. He's taking pictures of her and following her routine so that he knows when and where to pick her up. Emily ends up catching him and she confesses that she let herself into his house, to which he kind of laughs it off. And I don't know, it's this weird thing. He's very tense about it, but once Emily assures him that Rachel didn't do anything to, tip her off about her current situation, he was fine. And this is where Emily started to feel feelings again. So later on, the judge comes into the restaurant and Emily suggests having another party for Aidan and Cecelia. It's not a fundraiser. It's just a way for the town to gather around them and to show their support. She recommends a Christmas party because she was so sad that Aidan's house was not lit up for Christmas. It's the darkest house in the neighborhood, according to her. And they used to go all out with the Christmas decorations when his wife was alive. And she just feels so sad. They're going through the holidays for the first time without his wife. And she wants to make it brighter for them. The judge, of course, thinks it's a great idea because Aidan is this perfect angel who deserves everything in the world. And they set this party up. Aidan approves it because it would be weird for him not to. They would start to question why. But he has his rules. He says, keep it outside. Don't come into the house. We know why he doesn't want them to come into the house. But, they just figure it's already a lot of pressure on him to be without his wife for the holidays for the first time. We don't want to wreck his place with every single person in town going into someone's house. So they set the party up outside, and Emily notices that Aidan is pretty distant. Like, he will talk to people at the party, but he goes inside and he's just very awkward. He stands at the base of the stairs, and he locks the door to the entrance to the house. So, being the snoop that she is, she lets herself in one more time. This is while Rachel is downstairs snooping again because Aidan is lost in conversation with people in the town. This is Rachel's escape plan. With the whole town in the yard, she's able to get out, because what is Aidan going to do, really? Chase after her, beat her up in front of everybody when they believe that she is his cousin? No, that's not going to happen. So she goes downstairs, she grabs his gun, and she grabs some of her things that she wants to take with her. She awkwardly meets Emily in the living room. And then Cecelia comes in, and the three of them have a very awkward exchange. Cecelia doesn't want anything to do with the party. She just needs a break. She goes up to her bedroom, closes the door. Emily awkwardly asks for the bathroom so that she can wait for the coast to be clear so that she can snoop herself. And Rachel points to the bathroom and then goes upstairs to find Cecelia. Now, this is where everything hits the fan. Emily goes downstairs into the basement and starts to snoop around at Aidan's wife's things. She never finds the Polaroids or anything like that. But at the same time, Rachel is upstairs waving an empty gun in Cecilia's face saying, "We need to go." And what's crazy is that Rachel adopts Aidan's vernacular. She says these things that Aidan said to her. She feels guilty about it immediately, but she does this to Cecelia to protect her, tells her, we have to get out of here because we don't want you to see what's going to happen to your father, when everything comes crashing down on him. Because he is ultimately the only thing that she has in her life right now. So while Emily is snooping and while Rachel is threatening Cecelia, Aidan comes back inside, goes downstairs into the basement. He sees the doors open and he sees Emily snooping around. So to kind of distract her, he pulls her off to the side and wants to show her something. It's at this point where I worry that he's going to do something to her, but luckily he doesn't get the opportunity because the truck starts up. His truck. It's Rachel and Cecelia getting into his truck to escape. So he freaks out, says that he needs a car. Emily offers him her car. They end up going together to chase after Rachel and Cecelia. Cecelia is terrified, as she should be. I would be terrified as well. So Aidan is chasing after them at this point. High-speed chase into town. All Rachel wants to do is to get into town, get to the police station. So this is when things go awry, because car chases never really go that smoothly in movies, in books, in anywhere. Rachel swerves to avoid hitting a bird. She loses control of the truck and ends up driving into a ditch where the truck will not move anymore. However, she has already lost Aidan and Emily because Aidan doesn't know how to drive a stick shift and he ends up stalling as well. So they end up running on foot. Emily ends up taking over control of the car, but Aidan is already out and running. But before he leaves, he says, "I should have killed her when I had the chance." This, of course, startles Emily, but she's like, I don't know. She is unable to make the connections with Aidan. She says, everybody says things in the heat of the moment, which, yeah, but, ooh, that's a bit of a red flag. And two, just the way that he was acting while chasing Rachel. I don't know. Maybe Emily believed that Rachel was trying to kidnap his daughter, but oof, Emily, we need to work on, the men you choose. Emily takes over a car because she knows how to drive a stick shift. Aidan is chasing Rachel and Cecelia into town. And at this point, we see that Cecelia is sticking with Rachel. Even while Aidan is calling Cecilia's name, she's running with Rachel. She doesn't really know what's going on, but Rachel notices that she's sticking by her side. Emily catches up to the trio. She sees Aidan catch up to Cecelia, and she thinks that he's going to hug her and treat her like the loving father that she knows Aidan is, but instead, he grabs Cecilia's arm and slings her backwards so that he can continue chasing after Rachel. And this startles Emily. She gets out of the car, she starts yelling Aidan's name, and distracts him long enough to give Rachel a bit more space between herself and Aidan. Rachel eventually makes it to the police station. Aidan comes in shortly after her and starts shouting over her because this is what he does to make her insignificant and make her words mean nothing. He yells at the police officers that she took his child, which she did out of her protection. And it's at this point where the police end up cuffing both Rachel and Aidan and send them into separate rooms so that they can be questioned. This is where Rachel reveals her real name, which is May Mitchell, and she describes her situation in detail to the cops. After this, we have a section where Aidan's mugshot is posted everywhere. He is the talk of the town again, but not in the way that he's used to. He is the villain. He has been vanquished and sent to prison. I kind of wanted his downfall to be even worse. Like, oh man, I don't know. But he's gone for life. So he's not getting out of prison. So we can just, I guess, fill in the blanks of some of the people who might be beating him up in prison, which is just, awesome for someone like him who is unremorseful for the things that he did and tried to blame the victim for taking his child when he was the monster that he was. Like, just, fill in the blank, take your time, be creative. But that's what happens. So his mugshot is everywhere. May Mitchell is able to reunite with her family, who had never stopped searching for her. Obviously now they're extra protective. And I just want to add a little note here because I forgot to do that when I was recording initially, but May Mitchell does describe the aftermath after being found and rescued and delivered back to her parents, how she unfortunately suffers from PTSD from being trapped all that time because of Aidan. She can't sleep at night because she is constantly waiting for the sounds of someone walking down the hallway, thinking that it's him. She always waits until it is daytime to sleep. So this is going to be more or less a life sentence for her too, and I think that that's something that we need to understand as a result of this book, that the trauma does not end once a victim is rescued. Being the snoop that she is, Emily is able to find May's address and goes to see her, to which May's mother is, apprehensive. She doesn't want these strange people in her house, but May allows Emily to come inside and speak to her just very briefly, and Emily is able to give May a hug one last time before Emily herself leaves town as well, just because of all of the bad memories and the fact that Emily possibly could have been a victim herself had she stayed with Aidan long enough. What we hear about Cecelia, I wish that this would have been a bit better. We learned that Cecelia was sent to her grandparents, who I assume are her moms, to live, and it gave May a bit of closure to know that Cecelia is safe. But I wish there was another chapter where we were inside Cecilia's mind. How is she going to move on to this now that she basically has no parents left? It's devastating what happened to her and how she ended up. I know that there is closure there, that she's safe, but she can't be okay, especially losing her mother and her father in such a tight time period. I feel for her. I feel bad for her. I feel bad for children who are in similar situations as she is, because this happens. So it would have been nice to have gotten into her head again, but on the other hand, I feel like it just would have been gloomy, because you know that she's devastated. You know that it didn't end well for her, and I just feel so bad for Cecelia. Similarly, I wish that Emily would have been given a bit more. I liked her character. I liked her contributions to the story, but I wish that there was a bit more of a connection between the fact that Aidan was so cocky to introduce Rachel as a family friend to Cecelia, but then as the cousin to everybody in town. He was so confident that, she wasn't going to get out, that I wish that at that party, Emily and Cecelia would maybe be able to talk, see some red flags, see some things that Aidan maybe is lying about, working together to come to the conclusion that Rachel shouldn't be there and that something's happening to her. I really wanted this story to end up with Rachel, Cecelia, and Emily working together collectively and consensually, because I feel like Aidan was sloppy enough where they could have put those pieces together and put him away that way. But At the end of the day, I still really enjoyed this book. Again, all of the worst parts of the story were not explicitly written, and I appreciated that because I wouldn't have been as invested as I was had they been more explicit. If you've gotten this far and you still want to read the book for yourself, as always, the link to its Goodreads page is in the description below. Click on that, find the retailer of your choice and purchase it from there, or go to your local library face-to-face or through your library app to borrow it if it's available. Otherwise, I have been Jim. You've been great. Happy reading.